acres. That is a U.S. number. An American farmer today needs 16 years of cash rent to cover a 35% down payment on a quarter of land. 4 years ago, it was 12, not 15. 12. In Canada, the spike may not have been steep because Canadian operators were paying cash, but the structural question is the same. We are moving from ag being a real estate game to ag again being a business-based game, and the operators who may not have made that shift yet are the ones that may get hurt. This morning, we have the U.S. numbers voice and the Canadian read in the same room. I love that. We should have maybe added Mexico, but maybe for a future show. Looking at the same question from two sides of the border. This is Growing the Future. Welcome to the Cost of Staying In. We are live right now on YouTube and on Zoom. Please like, subscribe, turn notifications on. It helps us get in front of producers who may want to hear this. If you know somebody sitting on a land decision or running numbers that will not close, share the stream with them before you do anything else today. My name is Dan Aberhart. I run Growing the Future, Western Canadian Agriculture's foremost live briefing platform, and as of recently, is foremost AI training platform for ag operators. I grew up alongside a farming operation that today runs over 20,000 acres, Aberhart Farm. So everything we do lives at growingthefuture.ca, the live briefings, the Growing the Future operating systems if you want to join, and go check it out. We've got a lot of great operators learning about how to use AI right now. So the U.S. is about 2 years ahead of us on this cycle. Their interest expense, their land values relative to what the land produces, their debt service ratios, those numbers have already moved hard. Canada is moving in the same direction, just from a different starting point. The question I wanted to answer this morning is, what does the U.S. data tell us about where Canada is going and who can afford to stay in when we get there? Two people, two countries. Let's go. The chat and the Q&A are open. Thanks so much for joining live. I see wonderful folks in the chat. So I did put the resources for today into the chat, and I want to recognize our platform partners that make it possible. Crop Aid Nutrition, Hammond Realty, GRIP, Brome Trail Originals, Convergence Conference 2027 is going live February 2nd to 4th in Regina. I hope to see all of you there. David and Eric, you as well. And today's presenting partner, new to the channel, is MNP Ag Intellect. So let me bring in two voices. First of all, the Canadian read. Eric Olson leads the farm management consulting group at MNP. You may have heard of them. About 40 people, Manitoba and southern Saskatchewan, that he's working with in the organization. They have 700 agricultural professions. And how many partners now, Eric, across the board?
I think we're close to 1,500 partners in MNP now.
It's wild. So I work with them here in Brandon in my business. God bless him. So he began his career at FCC. He was in Verdun in the late 1980s during the worst of it. I'm sure there's some stories from Verdun, personally and professionally. He does economic forecasting for the Canola Council for Canadian canola growers, and he delivers the State of Ag in Manitoba to Canadian central lenders twice a year. He has seen both ends. Eric, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Dan. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's going to be a great conversation. And David Widmar, he co-founded Agricultural Economic Insights in 2014 because he saw a gap between peer-reviewed academic papers nobody reads and ag media that was just cranking out the content for clicks. And he's a non-farming sibling like me, so I feel like we're brothers in arms. So since then, right, we had a good talk about that in the green room. But since then, one free article every week on what is actually happening in the U.S. farm economy. He co-hosts the Ag Forward podcast. His data on farm interest expense, land economics, and operating margins is what set up this whole conversation. David, welcome so much to Growing the Future.
Thank you, Dan. Looking forward to today's conversation.
It's going to be awesome, and we want to see the world through your lens so we can learn and we can apply it to what we're doing up here as Canucks. You know, we're like the big toque on the American great country of USA, keeping you guys warm, and great partners. But you've been tracking the U.S. farm economics since 2014. When did you look at the numbers and start to think, well, maybe something structurally different is going on here? What's your read on things? Let's walk us through it.
Well, I think we can go all the way back to this 2008, 2009 financial crisis. It started as this housing crisis in the US and it went around the globe. And the US Federal Reserve stepped in and tried to save some of these banks, tried to save some of these institutions as they were failing from this home mortgage crisis. And after that, that's whenever the US Federal Reserve started exploring something called quantitative easing. It was this recurring effort to put interest rates at or near zero and maybe even buying some debt for their balance sheet. So buying debts and putting them on their balance sheets as assets to help them help regulate the economy. The goal then was to stimulate the economy. But for you and I and listeners, it resulted in over a decade of 0 or near 0% interest rates. You might have heard of ZIRP. And so it was this Federal Reserve policy. And low interest rates, I think we could all agree that high interest rates are distortive, right? And they create all sorts of problems in the markets and the economies. Well, in my observation, 0% interest rates create all sorts of problems as well. They're distortive for all sorts of reasons. And the biggest distortion is on asset values. So we're dealing with higher interest rates today. So interest cost comes to mind, but still this asset value conversation is still out there. It's a bit of a hangover.
Yeah, and things are changing so rapidly in the States too. We have a new Federal Reserve just came out this week, but I don't know. The markets seem to kind of shrug it off. And I was asking you a little bit about how you guys have achieved world peace here. High fives. It appears everybody's back to business, as you were. Everybody's good. Let's get shipping again. Like where's the read now? Even in the last week, so much has happened. It seemed like are we in a phase of quantitative easing? And how are they going to tackle the debt versus interest rates going forward in the States?
Well, every time there's a new Fed chair, I'm always skeptical of a new Fed chair. We kind of got to get used to their mannerisms. There had been a long progression of a lot of communication and forward guidance coming out of the Fed. And the new chair, Kevin Warsh, looks like he wants to be a little bit more tight-lipped. He wants to be a little more, hold his cards a little closer to the vest. And he's set out 5 areas of task force that he wants to review. He wants to review interest rate policy. He wants to review the role of data, what data sources they're using. They can find maybe some better data sources. He wants to talk about the Fed balance sheet and communication strategies. So we might see some change here. But I think the 10-ton elephant in the room for the Federal Reserve is inflation. And so 6 months ago, there was this kind of split. The inflation was cooling, but not back to 2%. Unemployment was low, but trending the wrong way. And so the Fed, after this Iran conflict and energy price shocks, interest rate or inflation has definitely ticked higher. And the Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, said that they're going to tackle inflation. They're going to get it under control. That's priority number 1 for them. So unfortunately for producers, that might mean some upward pressure on interest rates. So we can see this interest rate story continue to ratchet its way sideways or slightly higher over the next year or two. I don't think anyone here is telegraphing a big jump like we saw from 22 to 24, but I think we're going to see some incremental upticks here.
Kyle Dormuth, you got your hand up. I wasn't sure if that's just playing with the buttons or you sincerely wanted to join the conversation in person. I mean, if you do, I would give you kudos, high fives, fist bump for want to jump in with these guys, but I'll assume that you were playing with buttons. But we will allow anybody who wants to come on to join the conversation. We will answer your questions if you put them in the chat. And I think we should take advantage of the intellect we have on the call. Eric, how is that tracking for you in Canada? Obviously, U.S. is the dog's wagging the tail on it. We're the tail, I guess, typically. But what do you see?
Well, the first piece that we discuss interest rates, it's always a big issue on farms, right? Where rates are going. The couple of things, and I'm going to kind of a little more on a microeconomics than maybe the macro that Dave looks at. When I talk to our clients, we still see interest rates at historical lows. Like they're not as low as they were when it was free, but rates aren't bad. And I think right now in Canada, if you look at the economics with inflation, I probably agree that our rates are going to be a little bit squidgy and go sideways to a little bit up, but I don't see a lot of big jumps in interest rates like we saw before. And stability is good in agriculture generally, especially for our clients. So understanding where that is moving forward.
Yeah, you're fairly optimistic and a little bit bullish. Well, you even have your background there. You have a bull in your background.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's an indication of your economic positioning or just like the art involved there. But hey, folks, has your annual interest expense grown meaningfully in the last 3 years? Please let us know what you've experienced. It is tough because it is really low historically, especially if we're, get into Eric, you were there in the 80s and we saw what that did. And I made a joke on Facebook. I had to go to town and do a Sears catalog pose the other day to keep the farm going. But I think we're getting a good. I'll come back to this read here. David, walk us through the U.S. row crop picture right now, not the aggregate net farm income number, but the actual picture for the grain producer that maybe we can relate to.
Before I answer that question, I want to mention to Eric. Yeah, we're going back to average. So if you look at enough data, you're going to see that that rear view mirror that we all might have had over the last 15 years is a little bit distorted because of that ZIRP, that 0% interest rate policy. If you zoom out to the 90s and the 80s and the 70s, we're getting close to something that's more like normal. I think the hangover is not that we're high relative to history, it's that we're high relative to ZIRP. And so we have to get some adjustments. And so if you think about your farm and you're at, 3.5 or 4% interest rates, now you're at 7, 8%, that's a doubling. If you look at the farmland market, it's got a big step up too. It's this relative change that we've seen that I think is causing the most pain. But Dan, going back to your point, one of the things that we've seen, to your question, one of the things we've seen for U.S. row crop producers, lower commodity prices. I think that's going to be the same across the border here. We also have stubborn cost structure. So our cost structure had been slowly working its way lower, and then the Iran conflict really put energy prices and fertilizer prices back up to the top. So that's creating a lot of squeeze for producers. I think one of the differences here that we might have in the U.S. is we have a government credit card that apparently has no limit. And so we just keep spending in the US government.
Yeah.
And so we've been shoveling all sorts of ad hoc. Ad hoc is Latin for as needed. So we have a farm bill and we have farm bill programs. And when those don't work, we don't really want to change the farm bill or we don't want to make a better policy. We just want to complain to the administration or the Congress. And they seem to be willing and able to keep shoveling out. So when you adjust for inflation, we have the second most amount of government programs coming into the farm economy today than we've had going all the way back to the 1920s. And so huge amounts of dollars going into the farm sector right now.
I don't think we have the equivalent of the American Express for farmers in Canada. Eric, we're going to get to you on that. Maybe we wish we did, or maybe we didn't. Maybe it's not a blessing. Maybe it's not a boon. It's a bit of a curse. But folks were responding to this interest expense question. 12% said yes, significantly, have seen an increase in their annual interest expense. 42% said yes, somewhat. 35% said about the same, and 12% said not applicable. But and I'm wondering how much this quantitative easing you're talking about is affecting farmlands. But we have such a different political environment here when it comes to agriculture than the Americans. Eric, how do you feel about that?
Well, the first thing on interest rates, kind of a funny anecdote. I have a partner that I work with who's in his mid 40s, and when rates went up in 2022, that was the first time in his business career he ever saw rates where they didn't go down. So they dropped for that full period of time. So it's a bit of a shift of mindset, especially for the younger producers. Now, you mentioned back in my day when I was at FCC in Verdun, my first loan I gave a producer was at 12.5%, and they were excited to get it. Right? I do that right now. It's like a credit card. But back about the government programs, and farm support. We've got crop insurance, we've got AgriStability, we've got some private ones like ours, and really for our producers, looking at those margin-based programs. Our clients have built up and our farmers have built up some good margins. So they got some protection. What we're looking at from our standpoint from a MNP and when we talk to our clients is next year. We've already got this year already booked. A lot of our clients had their fertilizer locked in, prices did a little bit of boy. So we can see this year, depending if you grow a crop, should be a good year or an okay year. We're a little worried about the year coming. And of course, that's just a future orientation of producers. They're always thinking ahead. But I don't see anything changing politically in terms of support for agriculture. And I think we have what we have, and we just need, they're gonna move the chairs on the Titanic once in a while. That they're gonna change it here or tweak it there, but they're not gonna, the fundamentals of these programs, I don't think are gonna change a lot.
And they're not bad programs if you understand them and know when to take advantage of. Like, there's good infrastructure for businesses to protect themselves in farming.
I think one of the things in Canadian agriculture is that a lot of farmers don't understand the programs as well. And that's not their fault. Like, they've got a lot of things they're busy at. We spend a lot of time trying to work with our clients to understand that. And I always tell my clients, if I can figure it out, I'm not that smart, so you guys should be able to. But the bigger piece is finding partners, whoever it is, to be able to explain those to them. Look, I grew up I grew up on a grain and cattle farm, and like my father's idea of support was like, write me a check for so much an acre. And that's what he grew up with. That's probably not coming back to Canada ever again.
No. Harry Siemens is asking both men on this topic, how does the government help compare for farmers between Canada and the US? Government help. How does it compare? David, how would you frame it for us? I guess if we took a look at what you guys are getting, is it a blessing or is it a curse, or what do you think of the structure there?
Well, we got to separate this just a little bit. So historically, there was farm bill programs, and farm bill programs had a little bit of predictability. There's a little bit of a planning feature to them. Farm policy since about 2014 has had a risk management flavor. So we've got all these crazy programs. ARC is called one, PLC is called the other. And the idea here is if yields or prices, or a combination of yield and prices, change a lot between planting and the market year closing, they'll give you some program level payments. So it's like insurance. It functions like insurance. It's a higher safety net, and it's more of an area based. So it's not your farm, it's the whole county. Now, one of the downsides of those programs is you plant a crop in this spring, you harvest a crop this fall, you get paid next fall. So you can be bankrupt and out of business and not get your government check yet. So that's one downside to our farm bill programs. Now, the other side is since the trade war, the first trade war back in 18 and 19, we've been getting these ad hoc payments. So these ad hoc payments are just billions of dollars that get added to the farm economy separate from the farm bill. And there's some good things there, right? It's always better to have more money than less money. But I think one of the challenges is that producers who are renting land or buying land, they're having a hard time having conversations about what's an appropriate rate to do this. And so let's talk about this real quick. Right now, we have budgeted revenue for corn and soybean production in the Midwest. If you take out those variable costs, so seed, fertilizer, crop protection, you get left with something called contribution margin. And contribution margin is fun for an economist, but contribution margin doesn't mean a whole lot to maybe your audience. But contribution margin is how much you have left to pay your cash rent, your machinery expense, your labor, your family living, and service your debt. So contribution margin is a pretty helpful measure. But here's the point I want to share is cash rent in the Midwest is now more than that contribution margin. So when producers the last 3 or 4 years have put together budgets, they've got to the bottom of variable costs and said, well, I'm out of money unless I get ad hoc funding. And that ad hoc funding comes much later. So they can't go have a conversation with their landowners and say, I need to lower the rents because my budget doesn't look good. Because the landowner goes, well, you're going to get ad hoc funding down the road, aren't you? And we all hope and we all pray that happens. But it's kind of like that game of musical chairs. The chairs keep getting moved out. The music keeps playing. And unfortunately, one of these days, producers are going to put in a budget and put in an expectation for an ad hoc program that just isn't going to materialize. And they're going to not have enough budget there to cover all they need. So I think what we've managed to do is add a whole lot of risk to our farm system. It's paradox. We have these risk management tools, but we've added risk down the road. We've added these payments to help producers who are in financial risk, but we're kicking the can down the road. And at some point, we're going to be in a tough spot.
Interesting. Eric, what's your take on the differences?
A big piece for us, our programs have been around, this margin-based program we call AgriStability. it's been around since the early 2000s. Like it actually was established because of the hog business had a downturn, and it's a margin-based program. And because it's a margin-based program and the rules are out there, we can unlike David, we can do plans around it, and we often do with our clients. We have a lot of clients that come in and look at what's my risk, what's my downside risk. The other thing is because it's margin based and it's based on a producer's, it's not based on an area average for a bunch of farmers in a county or an RM or a municipality. It's based on your own numbers. So our best producers have the highest coverages, which, people go, well, I'm having a bad year and things aren't working well. Well, our best producers have the best coverage. And between crop insurance, which is another program that we have that's pretty long and established, I know for your listeners in Saskatchewan, it's a little more political than Manitoba, but in Manitoba, about 98% of producers participate in crop insurance. Those combination, and then we also have the private insurance like GARS, which is again a margin-based insurance program that allows producers to look at how well they do, and that's how their coverage is. We can use that to budget, and we have clients that go into the year knowing that they're bulletproof to make money, or knowing what their delta is if they have a bad year, right? So this is, I have to be able to. It's $100 an acre that I'm going to lose, or $25 an acre, and that gives them confidence to go out and do things, and allows them to be farmers and not have to worry. And yeah, we have delays, and when we get payments, AgriStability has some delays, just like David talked about their programs. But if you can run that to a payment, and your professional advisors can say you're going to get $100 an acre, or $50,000, we can take that to the bank and have a discussion with the bank about it, which then again makes everything easier down the road.
So I don't hear you saying you wish we were more like the Americans.
Well, not in those cases. Ad hoc. I've been in the business for 38 years. I've seen ad hoc payments and what happens. We do a march to Ottawa, and everybody says we're not profitable, and they cut a check for every farmer. What that does is it doesn't allow you to plan, because hoping you're getting a payment. I think I would always tell my clients, hope's not a plan, right? You got to kind of run with what you have. So I like now. Lots of your listeners that go, well, it's great, MNP, they make money, they do AgriStability applications for us and all that. Yeah, we do, but we still think it's a good tool, and it's a tool that you need to look at in terms of risk management. And our producers that are listening here are smart, sophisticated business people. Yeah. I speak a lot to clients and farmers, and I tell them, quit talk. Like everybody goes, well, I'm just a farmer. Well, just a farmer is a pretty impressive business person. And like I'll do a little MNP example, Dan. We had a discussion about having clients come to an event, and one of our marketing people said, well, I don't know if your farmers will qualify, because the guy's got to be worth $2 or $3 million to qualify. And I just kind of laughed and went, I don't have a farmer that's not worth more than that, like that I deal with.
Did you hear that? You guys are all smart and sophisticated, and hopefully that's, a great thing to hear on a Friday morning. And it's true, because we are handling big bucks in this business under tremendous pressure with all kinds of variables, and doing a hell of a job, really. Harry Siemens.
I want to jump in here real quick.
Jump in, please, David.
I think what we have going on in the U.S., and I want to warn all producers, is that sometimes our risk management tools become the thing that get us in trouble down the road. If our confidence is more than our tools provide coverage for, that becomes a risk that we create on our own. And so in the US, we haven't seen our costs. When the cycles in agriculture go up and down, the commodity prices go up and down, our cost structure should come down. Cash rents should be coming down. And we're not doing that. We haven't done that. We're adding risk to the system. When we get really comfortable with ad hoc programs that are going to keep coming, and ARC and PLC programs, and lots of crop insurance subsidies, we keep adding risk into the system. And so there's kind of this idea that you either take a lot of small pains throughout your career, or you take really big pains at one point in your career. And so if we keep kind of band-aiding over these small issues, and we keep papering over them, we're going to have a real system-wide shock at some point in the future, just because we're not building these tolerances. We're not building the resilience in the business. It's all about the business resilience. And I think that there could be some disruption down the road.
Isn't your system, though, simply an outcome of the fact that farmers in some of these states actually have voting power, and that America has a role in the world and goes out and does things that sometimes hurts the farmer? And so I think the politicians turn around and want to make it right. They see food as a security issue, which may be more than we do in Canada, is my perception. And farmers love let's be real. You tell me. Farmers love Trump, despite how many blows they've taken internationally with tariffs, with all the activities he's been up to. Let's face it. Is that fair to say?
I'll tell you one of the secrets of American farm policy is our farm bill, a minority of farm bill spending goes to farms. The largest share of it goes to social programs that primarily benefit children through food aid or through low income funding. And so there's this red versus blue, Democrat versus Republican, urban versus rural coalition that helps get that farm bill through Congress. And it's this idea of we want to have, and the USDA, even the United States Department of Agriculture, has several different missions, and some of those missions are delivering these welfare benefits, these food benefits to more urban areas. Now, a lot of producers get frustrated when they say, "Oh, the farm bill costs X billions of dollars." And say, "No, that's not our money. That's this urban money. We need to separate those." And so there's always this great argument in agriculture. The farm bill needs to stand on its own, and we need to get our own because of Dan that argument that you just made out. And I personally think that's a dangerous precedent. And I think that we need to be building coalitions, and we need to be getting a lot of support for the farm bill. And so agriculture needs to be more than just planting and harvesting crops. It needs to be more, including more of this food umbrella. And so we're at a crossroads in ag. I think we got to revisit that situation here in the United States because that coalition is pretty weak today.
Well, thank you for educating me, and I really appreciate the perspective. Could always use more. Eric, Harry Siemens is asking, sometimes urban folks say, "Oh, the farmers are getting another check from the government." How would you respond to that, Eric?
Well, there's a couple things that run back to all the support of agriculture, and I'm going to do back to my economics background from the University of Manitoba. It's really about food security. It was, if you want to go to the maximum food security after World War II, that's when they came with the common agriculture policy in Europe that caused overproduction. So food security is always going to be important for any country. The reality is about these payments is our producers are running big businesses, and the way the programs work in terms of their limits, 3 million to 5 million or 6 million in terms of AgriStability or some of those things, they are going to get big checks. But those checks just don't go into the checks aren't net. Anytime a client gets any payment through any of these programs, they're usually in a loss position, or they're in a position where they're just breaking even. And they take that money and spin it back into the economy. Like, producers don't hang on to their cash a lot. There's a big chunk of that goes back into the local economy or what else they're doing. So the comment about, farmers just getting subsidy, I think ultimately that's a pretty important part of our piece, is to keep our farmers viable. And the programs we've established are green programs in terms of trade. So we're not affecting production because we're overproducing so we can get an extra subsidy. It's really about the whole farm, looking at a whole farm. And I think they've been successful, but we're never going to get away from that, because if you take I live in Winnipeg. You take neighbors that I have, school teachers, sometimes social workers, they view farms as just because they have a big tractor, they must be really rich. Now, they might have a lot of assets under their control, but it doesn't mean that they're all really rich. And you have to do that to make a living and be successful and efficient.
Harry's is saying, good point, Eric. Great answer. So that one landed for sure. Well, let's switch gears a little bit here, and there's a napkin-math star that I really love that David built here. It just gives us maybe some context. Can you folks all see that? This farm math calculator here now. So I sent this out hopefully to everybody that registered. I don't hope if I missed you. It's in the link that has the resources for today. If you're listening to this and you want this, if you're listening later on YouTube or on the podcast, just let me know. I think it's fun. I think it's cool. I think it's neat. And I think it's one of those napkin-math things you can do in the half ton at the side of the road, looking out at the field, and use it to sort of figure out where you're sitting there and on this land value thing, which is so big. And I can only imagine in the States what you guys are dealing with land values and rents. So the way that we use this, why don't you walk us through how we would use this, David, and how you came to look at this. And we've got some of our own Canadian numbers we want to look at, and Eric's going to talk about that when you walk us through it.
Yeah, so farmland is a really important topic in the United States. It's about 85% of the assets that farms have on the balance sheet. And we've seen a lot of appreciation over the last 5 years, over the last 15 years, but really, to Eric's point, there hasn't been many down years in the farm economy for farmland since the mid-1980s, and there's a reason why. But one of the things we want to point out here is farmland affordability has gotten a little bit out of reach for a lot of producers. I think there's two areas where this comes up. If a young producer is wanting to buy some land, it feels really pricey. Or maybe you're in an inheritance situation where now you're buying out your other siblings as part of this inheritance. That farmland is going to be really pricey. Before I get to the example, I just want to say that interest rates cut two ways in the farm economy. One of them is the cost of borrowing money. And when we're borrowing money, we all think, man, I really wish I had low interest rates. But interest rates also cut in the farm economy in terms of asset values. When we have low interest rates, it typically means really high asset values, and farmland still has this low interest rate pricing going on. So that's the background. That's the stepping stool for this. So what we have here in this first metric is simply think about what's this relationship between your value of the land, so this in this case, $8,500, and then you look at it relative to the earnings that it might be able to generate. And so you as an operator are probably going to be able to generate more than just that $180 per acre. But I think that cash rent is a good level set. That level set means kind of everybody who's in the farmland market can capture that, or that's kind of a prevailing rate. It's a good rule of thumb. So when we looked at it in Indiana, as Dan said at the start of this, it was as low as maybe 6 in the 6 years. So we took the value divided by the value of the farmland times 35% for that down payment, took the down payment divided by the cash rent. And we saw it was as low as 6 in the 1990s. It got up to maybe 10 by 2010, and it got up to 12 between 2014 and 2020, but now it's at 16. So you have to save 16 years worth of cash rent to make that down payment. Now, you have a lot of other streams of income coming through, but this is just the idea of how pricey is it for me to get my farmland. So, Dan, I'll let you guys talk about some of the assumptions you put into here, but it just kind of jumped out at me and struck me that, like, wow, we're kind of at the same spot here when you look at this relationship between farmland values and the income that we can maybe use as a rule of thumb for the valuation there.
This is so cool, and I thought we would be very different. I thought we would be behind, but Eric and I are going to talk about this shortly and see what... David, did you want to come on? David Schmidt, you got your hand up. I'm going to come back. Oh, he's got his hand down now. Okay, that's twice. We had 2 people close to coming on the show. It's good. People are they're circling. They're nibbling. But I'd love to have some folks that are brave enough and extroverted enough to come on and ask a question or share their thoughts. But so it's funny because when we first talked about this, it was that's okay, David. That's okay. You can't blow anything up by hitting the wrong button, thankfully. So we're all good. No animals were harmed in the making of this webinar. Land values, $15,000 in Indiana. Is that what you're using, David? Ish?
Ish, yeah. There's some quality differences, but that'd be a good starting point. So
sure. And then $326 for annual cash rent.
Yep.
Okay, so Eric, walk us through a scenario that I thought would be very different, but actually it's not.
Well, I just when I looked at this, we ran some numbers, kind of like and I could be, the land values are moving, but $8,500 an acre for some dirt in the Regina Plains.
Yeah.
And cash rents in there are around $180 an acre. That's what some of the bids are going out at.
Okay.
So we go 8,500 and 180, and we're getting close, pretty much the same number as we had here before.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a lot that goes into this rental piece.
Yeah.
When we look at our clients. So David, I have a question for you. What percentage of your producers, like how much of their own farmland do they usually own? In Canada, it's about 70%. The average producer in Western Canada would own 70% of the land they farm. So they rent 30%. What's that look like in the States?
Well, it varies quite a bit. It varies by geography. It varies by the size of the operation. In the U.S., we actually look at it slightly. We look at it kind of upside down. We look at how many acres in a county are rented versus owned. So we don't really look at it from the farm perspective. We look at it the county. So you take a state like Illinois, you take a region like that Mississippi or River region, they're going to have more than 60% of the acres in that county rented out to farmers. And so that's a pretty big difference there. Now, if you get over into the plains, think about Western Kansas, Western Nebraska, a much higher share of that is going to be owned.
See, when we look at the ownership piece, the other part about management, and I talked to Dan about this before, is breaking. We work hard with our clients. You talk about contribution margin. We look at gross margin, and we go land, labor, power, machinery. We look at that's the operating business in a farm, and we talk about we're in it, and then we have land, building, and finance, which is the cost of ownership of your land and your buildings, and rent. When we start looking at those, like our clients are running two businesses. They're running a real estate business, which is where they have their farmland, and they're running a farm operation. And we just think it's important to look at the efficiencies of both. And our land, building, and finance numbers over the last 5 years have not gone up significantly. Like I was looking at them today on our benchmark for about 300 farmers in western and southern Saskatchewan, and I think it's about 450. We include a number from western Manitoba. That's like $173 an acre. It's gone up 15% or $15 an acre. So in these good times, what we've seen a lot of clients do is reinvest their own cash back into some of these assets. So they haven't went out and borrowed a lot. Now we still have clients that went out and taken big steps, and they're hoping margins stay good. But again, there's that mix between my real estate business and my farm operating business, and you know, we see some headwinds like you do, David, with the operating business. Like we're in a position right now where you got to grow a crop to make money. And we got lots of insecurity for everybody on the cast. There's lots of headwinds in terms of pricing and fertilizer, and lots of insecurity and risk. But again, right now we think we're sitting pretty much okay on that piece.
We got Harry Siemens there. He's been asking lots of questions. Harry, did you want to jump on and ask your next question here? Harry's a seasoned journalist. You can unmute there, Harry.
Hi.
Good morning. Good morning. You're
Good
live
morning,
on Growing the
gentlemen.
Future
Great.
Productions.
Great discussion. My next question just had to do with how does the farm community look at that huge increase in land value and high cash rents and make sense and make money? And will we continue to make the transitions to the next generations so that they too can continue to farm? It's a bit of a rhetorical question, but I'd love your input.
Thank you, Harry. Go ahead, gentlemen. Who wants to take this first?
Well, I'll take the U.S. perspective here. We all want high asset values, but when that asset value is really high relative to the income that it can generate, that's the problem. It's not that farmland is $8,500 in this example. It's that it's $8,500 and we have $181 per acre cash rent. That's causing that affordability. That wedge there is causing that affordability. So, I mean, if we play this tool and we increase annual cash rents, farmland gets a whole lot more affordable. Or if we drop the value, it gets a whole of the farmland, it gets a whole lot more affordable. Now, farmers listening today, they don't want their farmland values to go down, and they don't want their cash rents to go up, right? So, like, it's going to be a little bit painful, I think, whatever that particular outcome might be. But we're in the opinion, so we think U.S. farmland, more broadly speaking, is not priced where the market is today. And so, in fact, the value is really high relative to where we think the market conditions should be. So cash rent seems to be really high, and we also have a higher interest rate environment than where farmland is going to be at. So everyone asks how this is going to resolve itself. I say, well, lower farmland values is one path. We could also see a scenario where the Federal Reserve could end up lowering interest rates. So maybe the broader debt market approaches where we are with farmland. The second piece here is that we could see cash rents move. It's probably going to be a combination of all three. And then the fourth one we would also be relevant is that farmland just might not be as appreciating, or might not be rising in value as fast as it has been. We might take some time to just sort of reach a new equilibrium. It could sort of be a little bit lackluster in performance over the next few years as it reaches sort of that market equilibrium that we're currently seeing.
And 4 years ago, it was much different. It was 12 versus 16. So that trajectory is probably not sustainable, right? I mean, you can't continue to go up forever in that regard. Something's got to change, right? Or if we're back at 180 here, then the land conversely would have been worth, to get back to 12 in this example, where we were 4 years ago in the States. I don't know about, it's $6,200. So Eric, go ahead.
Well, the question about the next generation coming in is interesting, because I think there's a traditionalist view that you got to own everything. Now it's controlled by a family. Like we look at families, we look at succession planning from an MNP perspective. You know, why does a farmer work his whole life to own 5,000 acres and then expect his son or daughter that's coming in to buy it from him? What's he going to do with the money? Why is there a shift in that generational wealth? So, you know, I think we're going to see a lot more interesting pieces around farm structure and how we look at, again, breaking that business up from the farming business to the land ownership business allows us to do that, because that real estate becomes maybe a family, the family trust, or a family legacy that can live on and still be part of the farm. But I can tell you, when we talk about barriers to entry into agriculture, you get a really smart young person out of the University of Manitoba at agriculture says, I want to be a farmer today. They can't enter the business because it's a big equity business, right? Especially on the grain side. So there's that piece of it. And I'm going to be I'm sounding pretty positive, because I think our producers in general are sitting really good today. Lots of risk coming forward, lots of things to work around. But I started my career in the really late 80s, and I foreclosed on grain farmers, and we saw land values dropping, and there was a point in period when I worked in Verdun, Manitoba, that you could drive south of town and I could pick out land that FCC owned at the time. I don't think we're going to get there. Like, I think we can see some land values dropping. I don't think we're going to have that type of debt crisis. I think producers are smarter than that, and I think the way the structure we are is different. But it doesn't mean we can't have a drop in land value. And what's scary about a drop in land value is, what is it due to the lender's confidence in the business? Because there's a lender side to this that adds fuel to this land values, right? Because lenders are aggressively putting money out. Now they're backing up a bit, but they're part of it. So, when I look at, like, I'm pretty bullish on farming, but I know that there's going to be a period where we're not going to make money. Like, that's just the nature of being in this market. And when that happens, what kind of war chest do you have, and how are you going to manage through that? Because in that, there's going to be the really good producers that are going to take advantage. And I think you need to start thinking, like, how can I position myself to be there when things get a little sideways for some of my neighbors? And it sounds harsh, but that's kind of how this business works.
Harry, you had another question?
Yes. Is it healthy for these big companies to own 200,000+ acres and more? And where's that going to go? And what's happening to the individual farmer when that's continuing to happen?
Well, if anyone asks me about, is it healthy for a big corporation on 200,000+ acres, I think we all know what we're thinking about. And when you're in debt protection, it sounds like the market's taking care of that by itself, right? The scary part about that is if you get a real deluge of land on the market, it will affect land prices, because the same guys that are on this podcast listening are going, land prices are up. But if there's a lot of land for sale in your area, farmers are smart too. They're going to go, well, maybe I'll bid a little less. Like there's the business side of that. They're not just going to bid it up because it's popular. They're going to bid what they think they have to get to buy it. And I just think if you start having big tracts of land coming up for sale, it could affect land prices, because it's supply and demand, right? It's just supply and demand.
We had that question going into Robert Angelic's live briefing next week in the comments. What's going to happen when all this land comes on the market? But I think of it not just, 200,000 acres is massive for a farm. That's 10 times the size of my brother's farm, which I'd consider to be a big, complex operation that's not easy to run on any given Sunday. But at the same time, what is that relative to the actual amount of land that has to transition just by virtue of the demographics that we have, people getting older and retiring? There's not as many young farmers. How are you viewing this in the beautiful United States, David? The big dogs, how are the big dogs doing in the US of A?
I'll add to the comment there about the 200,000 acres. I'm sure there are conversations going on about saying, how do we make sure so the people who have the assets now, right? These lenders who have now seized these assets, they're going to be carefully thinking about, how do we make sure we don't flood the market? And that was a situation we had in the 1980s in the United States during that farm financial crisis period. And there were groups put up. So these banks these organizations that had these assets were managing these farms for many, many years so they can unwind out of those assets. And so I don't think we'll see all these acres, flooding the market in a short period of time. I think they're going to figure out ways to do that. But I think your question, Dan, is, what's going on with some of the demographics at the farm level? And I think that right now, producers who are able to adjust their cost structure. So maybe they have a lot of land that they own, and they're able to not be stuck with high cash rents. They're being able to weather this a whole lot more. And I think sometimes those are large landowners, but I think another time these even larger landowners in the U.S. got there with a lot of rented acres, and so that's a bit of a trade-off. So I like to think about these sort of the pros and the cons. I think right now those who own their land feel like they're in a pretty good situation here because farmland values haven't adjusted. They're still sideways, maybe a little bit higher. And so they're feeling okay about this. And I like Eric's point about splitting the business out. It's a great idea I like to suggest it and recommend it, but a lot of producers in the U.S. don't separate that. They don't realize where are the engines of profitability in their business and which ones they should keep investing in. But I think if we move to the cash rent side, the cash rent's where the real squeeze is because that cash rent is going out the door every single year, and that's going to put them in a tough spot because they haven't been able to negotiate those rents lower yet. And so there are producers out there that are burning working capital every year because they haven't had the ability to negotiate those rents lower. And they're afraid that if they go and they say, I'm going to pay 10% less, that landowner is going to be able to find somebody else who will continue to pay the current rate. And so they're going to lose those acres, and losing those acres is always a difficult situation for the operation to right size afterwards.
Interesting conundrum for sure. That's a tough calculation. David Schmidt is saying, being located in Alberta and having a lending background, I think that is a great point that you're making, Eric. So the lenders are aligning. And he just asked another question. Are either of you hearing lenders talk differently about lending decisions being based on lending value versus cash flow? Eric, you want to take that one?
Sure. We're seeing it starting to come up with the financial community. People, they're looking a lot harder at the business part. If you go back when we were getting $22 a bushel for canola, and we went and talked to a lender about their appetite for risk in terms of a grain operation, they're like, bring it on. Like we're going to lend them the money no matter what. And we're seeing that they're taking a hard step back and taking a hard look at it. And Manette Farms is part of a bigger thing that's going on because they see that they can fail, right? And so they're looking more at cash flow than than just straight security. That being said, if you come into the bank and you don't got a lot of debt and you've got a lot of assets and you need a debt consolidation and you're throwing some land at them, they're probably going to do the deal, right? They're still looking at risk and whether they get paid back and where their risk's at. But there is a tightening, and our producers that are our younger guys and gals out there that are in the business that are starting out, even if they're with mom and dad, they'll feel it first. And they're going to feel that the banks are going to go, well, we're not too sure about that. And that's just the nature. The one thing you got to remember about banks are always assessing risk, right? And it depends. And unfortunately, even in agriculture, some of that idea about risk is coming out of Toronto. Like it's not coming out of Regina or Winnipeg. So they're the ones that are gauging when they want to do it. And it's odd for producers because when they really need the money is when usually they get told they can't have it.
Yeah, I was wondering, Alex, you're on the call today. I don't know if you're that shy. Just let me know. I texted you if you wanted to give the lenders perspective. We got Rabobank on the call. Rabobank. Yeah, so we did want to get to this, though. We are getting to the top of the hour. It's been a great discussion. I feel like it could easily go 2 hours, 3 hours, but what is this metric to people? You've got this link. You can play with it yourself. David, walk us through this second calculation, please.
Right. So we took it one step further. The first part, of course, was looking at the down payment. This is looking at these payments and sort of how much magnitude of payments you have to think about here. So putting in some of these values here, what's the land value? What's the cash rent? What's the interest rate that you're financed at? And what sort of is this amortization schedule? And this value is telling you the first year payment. So it's this idea of, well, how big is this first payment that I have to make for my farm relative to current interest rates? And so this value is coming in at 200%. And so this would imply, you need 2 acres to support that first payment. In the US, we're getting really close to 300%, which would be 3 acres for every 1 acre we're making the debt payment on. Now, of course, the hope for a lot of producers that we get a little bit of inflation throughout our debt maturity cycle or amortization year. So maybe those earnings or that rent in this case would work its way up. And then eventually we kind of get to a neutral scenario, or maybe we're getting a scenario where we actually get some annual earnings out of that. And we're not just putting extra money into it. So the point here is that this high valuation scenario for farmland, this tight affordability scenario often means that producers are going to have to bring in other resources, other owned acres, or maybe some off-farm income in some sort of a way to make sure they can get the funds that they need there.
What kind of off-farm income can you use to offset $8,500 an acre land?
Probably need to have a podcast, Dan.
Well, you need to be a big shot on YouTube, let me tell you. I'm going to be, hey, if there's a bit of a dip, I might be buying a lot of land, based on the revenues on the show. But where are we at? Where are we at in Canada, Eric? Oh, I'm going a little bit crazy here. Annual cash rent, dollars per acre. I want to put in our other example here, $180 on 8,500. So we're 250%. So it takes 2.5 acres of rental income to cover the payment on 1 purchase acre in your example. And what are the interest rates that you would guesstimate there?
I put 4% down for interest rate, Dan, right now.
Ooh, that's going to change her. Where did I feel like we're on Prices Right here or something. So 195%. So it takes, why is it 2 acres of rental income to cover the payment on 1 purchase acre versus 3 acres in the States? What is that saying to you, Eric?
I think there's a couple, our rates seem to be relatively lower than the rates that David put in there. After I talked about banks saying they don't want to give money, banks still give farmers probably the most preferential rates of any client that we work with because of that land backing. So you do get lower rates, even though you never think they're low enough. The other thing that says to me when you look at that is that probably our land is still a little bit more economically priced, as opposed to there's not maybe a little less speculation in it. Like if I don't have the rental, but so for David, I work in southwestern Ontario where the county of Perth land goes for $55,000 an acre. And cash rents are $300 an acre. but those are driven a lot by livestock, not by the profitability of the grain side. So, that is the most, that's the most expensive land that I deal. Well, I guess we also work in the lower mainland. It's $100,000 an acre, and that's all driven by livestock, not by pure grain.
So the things that jump out to me here is if we were building the state example, we would have 6.9 or 7% for farm level interest rates today. And we have, in our example, we use a 20-year amortization. So I think that those two things are going to drive this a lot, right? So if you keep spreading out those amortizations, you can get that payment down a little bit lower. So I think there's just a little bit of a gap between the example I gave and what the tool is that you guys might be using.
Alex Clark is offering from my side of the desk, which is Rabobank. I don't know that there is necessarily tightening, but we are asking more and better questions to make sure that the risk is properly being both understood and assessed. We've adjusted some required ratios down because of the environment and have some better interest only or extended amortization options. Yes, we wanted to do an episode on creative lending, didn't we? We need to get to that. So less about tightening and more about having creative solutions when the risk can be mitigated. Wonderful. Well, we're coming to the end here. Did you guys have anything more to add before we bring this joint effort? It's just so wonderful to see our countries cooperating like never before in the history. Have they cooperated so wonderfully and made great deals? Love making deals. What's your take on the Canadian take here? What did you experience there today?
I would just share that I think that we, at least from the U.S. perspective, we sometimes get too myopically focused on interest rates and borrowing costs, and it has way more impact on our operation than just interest expense. One example here is all the appreciation that we've seen in U.S. farmland values going all the way back since the 1980s. It's a really impressive, exciting story. But about half of that appreciation has came from lower interest rates in the farm economy. The other half has came from higher rents or higher earnings to that farm. So really think about how that interest rate story has affected asset values, and don't let that. I have a lot of producers tell me like, "Oh, I don't own any money on my farmland. I'll be safe. I don't have to worry about any risk in to interest rates." Well, no, interest rates also affect valuation.
Love it. Harry Siemens is saying, thanks again. Love the real answers and real questions. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming on, Harry. And Joshua Leffers is asking, what do the numbers say when land values greatly exceed cash rent, depending on crop type, i.e., potatoes versus wheat, obviously is two different things. And you, Eric, you talked about a bunch of different examples that are maybe hard to relate for different reasons, but you got to talk apples to apples when you can. So if land value is 20 to 25K per acre and cash rent is around 300 to 400 on average, what does that say? Thanks. And where are you, Joshua? What are you talking about specifically? I'll let you guys answer. If land value is 20, 25K per acre and cash rent's around 300 to 400, what's your read on that, David and Eric? Go ahead, David.
Never underestimate how low of a return your neighbor's willing to invest at that farm at.
Eric?
When it comes to buying farmland, if you ask a true accountant, now I'm a partner in an accounting firm, they'll tell you never to buy it. It's always cost too much, but it's been probably one of your best returning assets you have on any farm. It's just the nature of farmers are the ones bidding up farmland. Right. And there's guys that are well-heeled enough and girls are well-heeled enough to bid it up, and they're going to do it until they don't. And then when they don't, it'll go the other way because they'll be the same ones that are holding back getting a deal. Right. So I don't know.
Well, it was wonderful for having you both on the show for the very first time. And here in Canada, if you want MNP Agriculture to reach out to you about your farmers financial benchmarking, you can offer yes, or maybe later, or you're just here to learn, that's fine. We'll be getting to know lots of the folks from MNP better on the show as we go. We're doing a benchmarking series this fall, summer and fall together. Hey, Eric, that'll be fun.
Right. Yeah, it will be. Thanks, Dan, for having us on. I've enjoyed it today. Thanks, David. But it's kind of cool to get on and talk about these bigger issues and getting in front of the audience. So if you ever want to know more, just look at us. mnp.ca is the place to go.
Love it. Love it. And David tell the audience how they can get a hold of you and interact with your stuff more, because I love what you're putting out there. You're doing a great job.
The easiest spot to find me is at aei.ag. So AEI stands for Agricultural Economic Insights, but our website's aei.ag. You can read all about the things on our mind and all the ways we work with producers.
Well, and how did your numbers work out? And I just wanted to let everybody know, we're not seeing any of your numbers that you put in there if you're worried about confidentiality. It's just for you to play with that. But at the top of the hour, I said the math of staying in has changed and the operator's running the old playbook. Well, they might not know it until they're already in trouble. So I think working with people like David and Eric is valuable. We got the juxtaposition of two different countries here. And next week, I'm very excited. We're going to hear from Robert again. He's got a message. He's turned very bullish on Canada and Russia based on everything that's already happened. He's very bullish on commodities as well as land. He's been bullish on land in the past, but now I think he's really thinking we could see a super cycle for the next 3 years. And let's face it, he's a well-researched, fairly successful guy. So I think it pays to pay attention whether you agree or not. And so today we talked a lot about running your farm like a business instead of a real estate play. There is a difference. So get a hold of Eric. I just want to encourage everybody too. We had some of my cohort 1, God bless them, in the building your, growing your future operating system, building your operating system for your business and your farm. It has been amazing. And we're having so much fun and rubbing shoulders with amazing people in agriculture. So go to the website, growingthefuture.ca. I'm starting another cohort in August, and the stuff that we're building is wild. So I really appreciate you two guys being on the show. Thanks, Harry, for your involvement. Thanks for all the audience showing up again today. We'll see you next week, and have a great weekend. And David and Eric, we're going to have